I'm delighted to be here with you on Fusatsu. It's the first time I've been given a talk for Fusatsu, actually. So for those of you who are first time in any of the roles that might be new, which I did notice there were a few, we're all in it together here. But I do feel, very, very deeply that this ceremony that we're doing right now together right here is very urgent. For me, it feels very urgent and important. So I'll share a few thoughts about the precepts, but I'm just glad that we can be together and have a shared intent to be here and to be at one, to be at one mint, to do this atoning, which is not quite the type of atoning that we're used to hearing about, perhaps from a Judeo-Christian Western point of view. It's a little bit different approach that we're going to talk about, the ceremony and also the precepts and what it means for us to think about being at one with, as a way to dispel, transform, shift some of that evil karma in the world. So Enkyo Roshi likes to say there's all this bowing that we're doing, that she really likes a lot of bowing. This bowing is a real way of just saying, I'm letting everything go. This is a dropping away, a releasing, and a reminder that we can let go of the pretension of explanation. We can let go of even the pretension of an apology or rationalization, our fixed ideas, habits. We can just let it go and just let it drop right here and right now with our vows. And Dogen, Eihei Dogen, our ancestor and teacher, said, when we can allow this process to support us and just let go and nurture trust in ourselves by turning towards ourselves so that we can respond to the world as it arises in front of us in a way that is free from effort. We can practice this, and that pure trust will emerge, and self and others are simultaneously turned at one and turned towards ourselves and each other. And Enkyo Roshi's teacher, our direct ancestor, and Bernie Glassman's teacher, Taizen Maizumi Roshi, who I'm sure you've heard mentioned here and there, he said that our practice in general is about closing the gap between the self and the self. And so that makes me think of being at one with very much when we're doing these vows. And he says we have a practice known as the paramitas. Paramita means to have reached the other shore. But Dogen Zenji says the other shore is already reached. In other words, the meaning of reaching the other shore is to realize that this shore is the other shore. And this life is unsurpassable, realized life. And there is no gap. And I think Fusatsu can help with that. So if there is a purpose to all of this, it's to realize that this shore and the other shore are the same. And the purpose is to close the gap, to realize that there is just this one life right now, right here. And if we're reaching for that other shore or that idea of what we're supposed to do or be, that's just extra. And that's where we get into trouble, is when we're reaching outside to say, how am I supposed to be? Oh, you're good, I'm bad. I'm not doing this right. How do I do this? But it can be hard to recognize this oneness. So I just would like to mention a book tonight because it is a precept book that we've been using just for a couple years. And I've had the honor of teaching the precept Jukai study class the last 2 summers that we offer here. And we've been utilizing the book by Nancy Mujo Baker. And she published this book in 2022. It's called Opening to Oneness. And it talks all about exactly this oneness. And her teacher was also Bernie Glassman, who we've been studying during this study period. And she is a teacher at the No Traces Zendo in New York. She was a professor of philosophy at Sarah Lawrence and a Dharma sister of Enkios. And so this book is about the precepts and different ways of working with them. And then the second half is really focused on Dogen and Dogen's philosophy and looking at the precepts from a much broader perspective in the sense of oneness. And what that might look like to actually work with all of these precepts and actively transform ourselves. And mostly, it's exercises and ways of thinking about these translations that have been handed down to us of the different precepts that we've adapted. And she has actual exercises that you can do to become really close with what these precepts mean to us individually, what it means personally to us. And then, in a broader scale, how to start to transform and take action and change what I think is about karma. So one of the things she points out is that the main difference, instead of aspiring to keep the precepts, is that we look deeply into our failure to do so. And it is this practice of allowing and indeed welcoming all that we tend to want to reject in ourselves and in others that opens us to oneness and the possibility of the precepts arising naturally and spontaneously. So in the case of the precept, she says, we need to shine the light of welcoming awareness onto the killer, the liar, the precept breaker in us. And such illumination, it's called the radiant light in Zen, Komyo, can be uncomfortable at first, but it helps us see what we're hanging on to. And it reveals and loosens our attachments to aspects of our conditioning so that that conditioning can let go of us, so that the body-mind drops off and we are at one with this idea. So it's really easy to think about the precepts as something that are bad and good and that we're supposed to do or not do. But actually, this is way before that, the way of looking at them as before bad and good. And a way of being at one with this human condition that we all have and have inherited since the beginning of time, and these qualities of all evil karma that are in all of us, being at one with that and really getting close to that, instead of pushing it away or pretending that we don't have those qualities, or instead of denying it or letting it drag us around and totally consume it. What about just looking at it as closely as we can, with a sense of not knowing, which is where we come to the 3 tenets, which I know we've heard about lately, but I think Ryoshin gave a nice talk about them. The Zen peacemakers came up with 3 tenets, and they're also a way to work with our precepts and the karma that we want to change. And so those are not knowing, letting go of fixed ideas about yourself, others, and the universe, bearing witness to the joy and suffering of the world, and then taking action. that arises from not knowing and bearing witness, instead of, oh, this is right. This is what I'm supposed to do. Oh, I'm a terrible person. It doesn't have anything to do with that, actually. If we can let everything drop and allow that space and our presence to come into ourself, our response will arise naturally, and the right thing to do will happen naturally. So you learn to bear witness to all the elements that are arising with a curious and compassionate attitude. And this doesn't mean suppressing the strong emotions that arise or stopping the escape into story drama, but rather being aware of what you are choosing to feed. And if we work with them, it brings about resiliency. And these muscles offer an ever-deepening sense of reality as life unfolds around us, and we're there and being intimate with it. So what does that look like if we're looking at an actual precept that we want to talk about or that we know is coming up for us? A great example, that's something that I've been thinking about and dealing with, and I think many of us might be these days, is anger. And I've also been thinking about this mystery of history repeating. I call it a mystery. It's a mystery to me. And why we humans seem to fall into these traps. And this evil karma just keeps coming back around. And if you look throughout history, we can see times where this has continued. And we have continued to fall into the tyranny and the destructiveness of greed, anger, and ignorance that is in with all of us. So, it can feel like, how is it possible to even start to dissolve any of this when we see these patterns repeating in different ways, but still very scary and in ways that can make us very angry. So the 9th precept is not indulging anger. And I like that phrasing of it, not indulging anger, because it's not saying in anger or not being angry. It's just saying not indulging anger. And we have 3 translations of the precept that we always take a look at. So Bodhidharma says self-nature is subtle and mysterious. In the realm of the selfless dharma, not contriving reality for the self is called the precept of not indulging in anger. Not contriving reality for the self is non-indulging in anger. And Dogen says, not advancing, not retreating, not real, not empty. There's an ocean of bright clouds. There's an ocean of solemn clouds. It's the way it's always been. Not advancing, not retreating, not real, not empty. There's an ocean of bright clouds. There's an ocean of solemn clouds. And it's there in all of us. And the Zen peacemakers say transforming suffering into wisdom. This is the precept of non-being angry. So non-being angry is another way of saying before no and yes. No, good, not bad. Non-being angry. So if we stop putting such tight constraints around even our definitions and our ideas, and we let them go, what kind of space arises there? And are we able to see a little more clearly what's right in front of us? Mujo Baker says, anger is a great teacher. As Bodhidharma's version of the precept tells us, more than anything else, it teaches us what the postulating self is and how fast it can happen, especially when we least expect it. This happens when we react to someone or something with lightning speed anger. When we say, oh, you can feel it when we're triggered. We're triggered. But also when some buried ancient anger we never knew was there wakes up and slowly takes us over. In either case, there's preference. Not this, not this. And the self is born over and over again. As soon as we say, not this, we are separating ourselves from it. And they're not at one anymore. And it's easy to think because it's not a good thing, I should just practice not being angry, but that's somewhat abstract and general. It's important to be precise, personal, and honest in finding out exactly what is my anger. And she offers examples and questions that you can look at, right? But really it's about getting to know it, getting intimate with it, as opposed to pretending it's something that it's not part of us. And then we all have a different relationship to it, and we all have different things that trigger us. It's going to be very personal. It means turning my attention away from the cause and the object and from the stories swirling around to the anger itself. And getting to know it means being curious about it, not having judgments about it, and compassionately allowing it. Getting to know who I am in each situation, who I am as a liar, a stealer, or one who gets angry and blames, and truly accepting it without any judgment is an important step in working with any of the precepts. So this energy that we're looking at, because it's destructive, is why we're looking at this, is the evil karma, is what we want to free and transform. So this is a way to look at it and transform it. And I think the ceremony helps, but you can do it on the cushion, you can do it, go get help to do it. It's more about recognizing it and then opening up the way that we're constraining it so that it can come out probably in a less destructive way, we hope. We hope. There's different types of anger. She says clear, pure anger is another thing. Often when it's about concern for others, I've found that concern for others can be a pure anger that can move mountains. That's me talking, and create positive change. So the work is to say, can we pause and drop these ideas and stay close to them, that emotion and that feeling that's stuck in a destructive pattern. Can we catch it? Recognize it? Just pause. And then respond in a different way, depending on what's actually happening. Can we take a breath? Can we sit for one period with it, without the story? Allow the space of not knowing to come back in. Can we bear witness to each voice and perspective of whatever it is we're looking at and going through and feeling? And then respond. We start with ourselves. You know, we're usually mad at ourselves for different things. It's a good place to start, right? And then we work on that response and shifting that energy and being at one with it, with people who are close to us, maybe in the broader world at work, and then obviously in a bigger scale, when we're angry about what might be happening to each other out in the world there. And in thinking about this history repeating in ways that we return to this evil karma because of beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, I'll end with a quote from Martin Luther King, Jr. History has taught it is not enough for people to be angry. The supreme task is to organize and unite people so that their anger becomes a transforming force.